All right, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this information session on the BIOPAMA Small Technical Grants for Assessments. My name is Hyacinth Armstrong Vaughan. I am the Regional Coordinator for the BIOPAMA program in the Caribbean and the focal point for the action component element, of which one of the elements we are presenting this morning, or today, I should say. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And the format of this session will be as follows. We will have an overview of the technical and financial elements of this assessment call. And then that will be followed by questions and answers, a question and answer session. And then we will have another session that just gives you an overview of some of the tools, diagnostic tools that can be used to access funding in this call. So before we move forward with the presentations, I invite you to use the question and answer, the Q&A chat feature on the Zoom platform to put in any questions you have to our panelists, and I will do a quick introduction of those persons at this point in time. So providing us with an overview of the guidelines and of the small technical grant for assessments will be Carol Martinez, our grant manager. And also from a financial perspective, we have Anna Rosenberg, who will also present on this element. So without further ado, I will switch over to Carol, so that we can start the process and the session.
Thank you very much, Hyacinth. So I'm inviting you to a little journey in order to visit our guidelines and the main criteria related to the eligibility for this special call for proposal. So maybe again, it would be worth to set the scene and to remind actually what is the main objective of the action component of BIOPAMA. So it is about to improve biodiversity conservation in priority areas through funding tangible on-the-ground action that are addressing both management and governance priority action identified by diagnostic tool. So you see here the key words that are actually constituting the framework of all the different calls for proposal organized within the time life of this action component. So you see already the close link between the knowledge and the action and how we can mobilize actually this knowledge and this through diagnostic tool. So this call is actually a part of a series of calls. There is still one ongoing related to the rapid response grants, but there are two new to come next year. And this special call for assessment is definitely provide good grounds for you to prepare as well the coming call for proposal organized within BIOPAMA. So the objective of this special call is indeed to increase the use of quantified management and governance assessment tool, mainly known under the acronyms PAIM and PAGE tools, and this in the ACP countries, protected and conserved areas, and to define or update a priority for action to improve the management and the governance of these protected and conserved areas. So again, you can see here the strong focus of this call about mobilizing, using these special quantified management and governance tools. We actually highlighted the importance of this call in the guidelines and specified as it is again a good preparation for the coming calls. So please take full advantage of this opportunity, because what you will assess, thanks to this call for proposal, will definitely be as many information that will be highly valuable for you to design your new project to be submitted to the action component. So we will go through the key main questions related to the eligibility criteria. First, starting with what was actually eligible for this call. Again, we come back to these special tools, the quantified management and governance assessment tools. And you can see here a quite long list of different tools. There is indeed a wide diversity of tools that are available. So this includes IMET, MEP, RAPAM, but as well the Green List assessment, the Enhancing Our Heritage assessment, the STGA analysis or equivalent. What is important to underline here is that the point of funding such assessment is not to have new report or new analysis, is to equip actually the stakeholders with new information, with new recommendation, and thus in order to help them to better identify or even to update result-oriented priority action. This already should spot the light of what this priority action implies as well in terms of potential environmental or social risk. So again, when you will implement such assessment, immediately you should think about what will be the key output in terms of having an assessment that very clearly identifies priority action, and that as well helps you to identify what could be then the potential risk and what will be the additional measures or action or activities you will be requested to implement in order to mitigate those risks. Another important question about this call is the how. So this call will actually provide to the selected applicant small technical grants for assessment. The maximum amount is 20,000 euros. It's quite a nice amount of money for supporting assessment. Having said that, one grant can definitely be used for funding several and complementary assessments. So be bold, do not hesitate to see complementarity between tools and to apply for several tools. And the maximum duration is 5 months. Why is that? Again, the whole purpose of this call for proposal is to support you in an enhanced and improved design of a future project proposal, whether for the BIOPAMA action component, future call for proposal, or any other funding opportunities. So when you will be able to actually get those assessments, identify your actions and what it means as well in terms of implementation, you will have, again, a good understanding of how to design new projects and new action on the ground. Related to the role and the process of this call is the fact that this call is an open-ended one. It means that as soon as you are ready to submit your proposal, we will be in a position to review your proposal and to submit it for selection to our donor. So in short, the sooner the better. The sooner you apply, the sooner we will be in a position to select you, hopefully, and then to grant you in order to put into place all the actions for developing such an assessment and identifying new priority action or to update some priority action. Another very important question related to any call for proposal is who is eligible. So for this call, actually, we have adopted a more open and comprehensive approach, again, in order to really help and equip all the stakeholders in the ACP countries to benefit from such assessment and then to be able to design and to build from those assessments new important projects. So this call for proposal is open to any public or private legal entities. Again, the action component is not funding individuals. It has been always funding legal entities. And those entities have to be registered as a separate legal entity in an eligible ACP countries. Those organizations, those entities can be either in charge of a protected and conserved areas or be involved in the management or the governance of a protected and conserved area. And this at the level of the park, the reserve, or the protected and conserved area, at the national level, for instance, a network of protected area, or the regional level. Again, it could be a network of protected area in your regions, or even targeting a transboundary area. So again, you can see the diversity of geographical scope and the diversity of label. You can definitely submit a proposal for this call for a site, for a protected and conserved area, for a KBA as well, or a transboundary area, or a system of protected area at your national level, or a network of protected area at your regional level. Quite regular criteria of eligibility. The organization who are willing to submit a proposal for this call for proposal have to be directly responsible both for the preparation and the management of the future grant. This means that one organization cannot apply on behalf of another organization. One organization can apply with and in partnership with another organization, but cannot act as an intermediary. The organization who applies will have to be actually implementing the grant. And something quite usual as well, but it's always better to remind it. A beneficiary from another European fund, from another European grant, have to think twice before submitting a proposal to this call, having in mind that definitely a project, an assessment that is already funded by another European funded project would not be eligible. So here this raises again the question of the complementarity between projects that are benefiting from European funds. You can play on complementarity, you can play in terms of synergy, but you cannot duplicate. So as you saw definitely in the guidelines, this table is capturing the different types of organization that could be eligible and that could be fully entitled to submit an application for this call for proposal. Maybe something important to remind, as you know, as part of any European financial support, there are special conditions regarding organizations established in OECD country. For instance, the USA. So in such cases, those special conditions imply that the organization are then only eligible for assessment that will be benefiting a least developed country or a highly endowed poor country. So please assess the status of your organization or even the status of your partner if you want to apply with a partner, and think about, again, if you are in such a situation. A quick reminder regarding our timeline. So the call for a small technical grant for assessment has been launched last month on the 20th of November. The ultimate deadline for submitting a proposal is the 29th January of next year. But again, it doesn't mean that you have to wait on this ultimate deadline. and you are warmly invited to submit before, since it is an open call, and the submission has to be done on a rolling basis, so the sooner the better again. And keep in mind, if you need any explanation, you have until the 19th January for asking questions to our colleagues in the regions, to Hyacinthe or Justin. Again, our portal has very useful information. Please pay a visit. Do not hesitate to browse and to look into this website. You can find again the guidelines. You can find any other relevant information, and more particularly, the different templates you will have to fill up to submit your application. So it's always very interesting to cross-read both the guidelines and the criteria, and to see into details what you have to fill up in order to submit your proposal. For instance, do not hesitate to be curious and to have a first look to the template, the technical template. You will see the different information that you will have to provide, the different questions you will have to address. And again, this will help you, if you have any doubt, to have enough time to ask a question to our colleagues. So this is as a quick overview of the different eligibility criteria. And again, I remain at your disposal for any question. And in advance, I wish you good luck. We look forward to a great proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We will go straight into the finance review, and then at the end of that, we will take questions. So I invite Anna to share her screen, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I start directly from the most important question. How much can be requested for small technical grants for assessments? The maximum amount, as mentioned before by Carol, is 20,000 euros. The key word here is maximum. You do not have necessarily to request this maximum amount which is available. Your budgets should be realistic. Every budget line should clearly show how it is linked to assessment. By definition, this call is intended exclusively to cover the assessment. Therefore, all the costs in your budget must be directly linked to assessments and identifiable as such. When we say realistic, it means that the development of the budget ideally is accompanied by requesting the necessary information from your potential service providers. For example, you may want to find out what is the cost of an assessment that you would like to order and be funded by BIOPAMA. Next. Some operational matters, very important. Small technical grants for assessments are funded 100% by BIOPAMA. This means that you don't need to contribute any co-financing. All the costs that are within the budget and that will be considered as eligible at the stage of the financial and technical report will be funded at the rate of 100% by BIOPAMA. The budget methodologically is based on the reimbursement of real costs with the exception of personnel costs. What is meant by the reimbursement of real costs? It doesn't mean that you spend first and we pay later. we do advance a considerable percentage of the grant by means of pre-financing. The reimbursement of real costs means that you will be reporting at the reporting stage on the spending directly linked to your grant. And if the costs are considered eligible, they will be all accepted and paid for. There is one exception to this methodology, and those are the personnel costs. The personnel costs are refunded to you or paid to you at a flat rate of 5% over the total of direct eligible costs. The template, which we will see a bit later, calculates these 5% automatically. Here is an example. If you plan to spend 5,000 on travel and subsistence linked to the assessment, as well as 10,000 for the assessment, your subtotal of direct costs is 15,000. BIOPAMA adds 5% to these 15,000 in order to compensate for the working time spent on the project. Next, some housekeeping matters related to the budget. Mathematical checks. The total budget stated in the project proposal must be equal to the total budget in your Excel spreadsheet. Make sure when filling in the template with the proposal to enter the correct amount, which must match one-to-one the budget on your Excel spreadsheet. Next point. We kindly ask you to use Excel formula in the budget calculation spreadsheet. Please do not hard code numbers because this leads to frequent errors. An example is shown on the slide. The cost category number 3, other costs and services. This is the main cost category, assessments. Let's say you plan to publish some documents and you need funds to implement the design and layout of a brochure. You plan to have 2 cost items in this line. So you enter 2, then you enter the unit price per each brochure, and then there is a formula calculating the total amount, which is 1,000 in this case. External services, evaluation, studies, analysis, assessment. As an example, you intend to sign 2 contracts for STGA assessment. Each contract is estimated in your budget to have the price of 5,000. You enter the number of units, you enter the unit price, and the formula calculates the total amount budgeted for this line, 10,000. The subtotal line also contains a formula. Please use it. Do not hard code the subtotals either. Clarity of your budget is extremely important for us for the purposes of its review and understanding. You are kindly requested not to group the costs together. Ideally, each cost should be clearly presented on a separate line. You can insert multiple lines in the same cost category as shown below, for example, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, each time providing an explanation which is developed enough for us to understand sufficiently how your budget is aligned with your proposal. The example here is quite clear, and this is for the travel related exclusively to the implementation of an assessment. So this is the travel of an international expert who will fly, let's say, from Paris to Nairobi. You budget the ticket for the plane, you budget some local travel according to the number of days that you plan for this expert, and you budget the per diems for an adequate number of days. Please be very generous with words when you fill in the column justification. Justification is mandatory. It is very hard to understand the budget if the justification is not sufficiently developed. And the conclusion, which has already been referred to by Carol, everything in this proposal should be directly linked to assessment. Only the costs related for assessment are necessary and will be accepted. As an example, we can take travel and subsistence, which we have seen in the previous slide, where an international expert was planned to travel and spend several days on site. The costs that are not linked to the assessment will not be accepted. And my last slide, it's a template. A template with an example. You will find in the documents for the call, the template, which is blank. Only the formula are entered and an example. So here is the example that we have been discussing before. We have already seen how the personnel costs are calculated, 5% over subtotals 2 and 3. And since this is the formula which captures the data in cost categories 2 and 3, I suggest that you start from the cost categories 2 and 3, and then the formula will calculate your personnel costs automatically. Once again, justification should be clear and sufficient, and all the cells in the budget should be adequately filled in. Please look at the template each time when you need to input data, something important. There is a footnote. So please follow the footnotes. For example, project proposal number. This is a number generated by the portal when you submit your proposal. Period of implementation. Please fill it in. And it must also match your proposal, which you will upload. This is it from my side. If you have questions, I am available.
Thank you very much, Anna and Carol, for that overview. I do not see any questions in the Q&A section, so I invite participants, if you have a question, please raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can ask your question directly. Okay, Aidan, I just saw you type in a question, so would you be willing to read it out?
Hello, yes, that's fine. Thank you for that, it's very helpful. I'm just wondering, for a typical protected area, just one protected area with no prior experience of diagnostic tools, which from the list would you recommend we go for? Because there's quite a few tools there.
Right. Carol, you want to go ahead or?
Sure, no problem. I think the first question here, in order to address this one, is to what would you like actually to further understand? What are needs you would like actually to further investigate or address? Do you have already issues you are already well aware and you would like to document, you would like to analyze? Is it more related to management, or is it more related to governance? So having already addressed this first question, then we can orient you to whether a PAIM tool or a page tool. So it's really related to your needs. What would you like to know better? What would you like to assess better? And on this basis, then indeed there is a diversity of tools that could guide you. And in this regard, I think the coming presentation presenting few types of tools will already give you good hints about what you could mobilize, what you could combine as well regarding your needs. But again, I would like to underline this. Think first about your needs, what you need to know first.
Okay. So in our case, I'm thinking of a reserve where we're mostly concerned with the management. The governance is mostly in place, and we already have a reasonable assessment of threats and so on. But we want a tool that we can implement over time, so that as we change management, adapt our management, we'll be able to see the outcomes. So, I mean, does one of them jump out as being the correct tool for that?
So in order to regularly take stock of the situation, actually all the different tools can be reiterated. So here there is no bottleneck, but if it is more in terms of management, then it's definitely a protected area management tool that you have to mobilize. But again, it's always good to check where we are. So since you have this opportunity, feel free as well to combine. It's not because you would like first to know more about management that you could not get good as well information or insight, or how your governance could as well actually help you to further improve or make even more efficient your management. So again, I understand from what you say that it is more about management, but feel free as well to combine the tools, because again, we offer this possibility. But a MET or other tool more targeting actually management could be definitely useful for you.
Thank you. And if I can be greedy, seeing as my mic is open, IMET was the one I was, had focused in on. Mm-hmm. Similar question, how long would you expect it to take? Now, I know that could vary a lot, but let's say for a medium-sized protected area where there's a good deal of information in place, but, in different locations and maps, roughly how long would you expect somebody to take to, to fill in the IMET completely?
The assessment itself can be quite, I would say, quite speedy. But what is fundamental is that the acknowledgement, the understanding has to be actually done with feedback, with consultation of your stakeholders or your partners or your authorities. So you have to factor that, and we know that we are in a special time. So we need to factor as well the possibility to reach out to stakeholders, to implement consultation, organize meetings. So here is really related to who you want to consult, who you want to bring on board in order to have a co-owned assessment. And this is fundamental as well in terms of supporting effective management. The consultation part, the assessment, the methodology is one important part, but the whole consultation around is as well fundamental. So here, depending your your location, the question of logistic, the number of stakeholders you want to involve. I let this in your own, I would say, assessment here. You have to see how long it could take you as well to bring people and to discuss about the findings in order to have really a co-round assessment. I cannot tell you on your behalf here.
Okay.
But do factor, my advice here is do factor the fact that you have to reach out at some point. You have to disclose the findings in order to share them and consolidate actually your recommendation, because there is nothing stronger than priority action that are co-designed, that are co-owned with your stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Since that time, we've had a few questions coming in. So there was one from Natram Ramnanan asking what tool will be best suited to assess the impact of invasive species on PAs. We could refer this tool to after this question, to after this session with the tools, if that's okay. And I will come back to that one. So Natram, we will answer that question, but I want us to at least go through the tools so you have an idea of what those look like, and we can probably better define then what would be best. There's another question here from Angela Aline and asking, can a protected area be defined as resource rather than a geographic area?
What do you mean by resource?
So let me find Angela. Go ahead, Angela, you can clarify.
So this is Angela here. I simply mean rather than a physical location, like a biological organism or something like that, and like invasive species and so on that can threaten biodiversity in general.
So when you have a look at the guidelines as well, and this is the framework of this call for proposal, actually what are the targets of such assessment are what we call priority areas. So it's a place, it can be a protected or a conserved area, it can be a key biodiversity area or a locally managed area. So any place that are identified as important from a biological, ecological point of view, and that are acknowledged at your national level by any document, a strategy, this is eligible. So what you define as a resource is species, plants,
Yes.
something like that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the assessment actually has to be implemented to the place where are these resources, okay? So the question you have to address first is this place acknowledged in a way or another already in your country? Is it a protected area? If not, is it identified as a priority from regarding its biological importance? If yes, it can definitely meet our criteria of priority areas. We are not only targeting, I would say, already gazetted protected area. Of course, they constitute the core of our investment, but as you can see, we are a bit more comprehensive. An area that is identified in your country as very important is eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And actually, Carol, the end of your response, I think, would have responded to Joanna Roseman's question, which was asking, does the protected area have to be legally designated to be considered? So I think, Joanna, you would have gotten the answer to your question there. We have a question for Anna. One of our participants, Danielle Lewis Clark, would like to clarify the simple cost option.
The simplified cost option in the case of small technical grants for assessment is applicable only to personnel costs. And in this case, we give you 5% in the budget over the total direct costs as a remuneration for your staff time invested in the project. You don't have to report for that. You don't have to provide any documentation to receive this 5%. It will be part of your budget. And let's go back to this example. For example, you budget to travel for 5,000 and you budget 10,000 euros for assessment. So your total direct cost will be 15,000. And these costs need reporting. They're based on the methodology of reimbursement of real costs. Then we apply 5% over this 15,000, and this is for the time that you worked on this grant. This 5% do not require any reporting or anything else for that matter. Those are the conditions or rules of this call. If something is not clear, let me know.
Daniel, does that answer your question? Okay, we will take that as a yes since we can't hear you because I asked you to unmute. Okay. Let's hope that is clear for our participant, Anna. Thank you very much. We have another question from Ann Sutton. Can we use funds to analyze monitoring data to prepare for the application of the assessment tool?
So again, as we indicate at the beginning of this info session, this call is aiming at fostering, increasing the use of quantitative assessment tool. The fact that you have already good monitoring data is definitely an asset, but you will have to mobilize those data through a tool, through a methodology that is already quite well, I would say, proven and implemented. But you have already a great and solid ground with all this monitoring data, but you will have to use them in order to feed actually the assessment of these different tools. So check what tools could be actually the most useful for mobilizing this data.
Thank you. Okay, we have two other questions. So Julian Prato asked, the university inside a biosphere that have been conducting research on that area for more than 5 years about management, biodiversity and conservation, can that university apply?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I was writing an answer. Yes, actually, as I indicate, legal entities that are in charge or involved in the management and the governance of protected and conserved area are eligible. So if you have such already collaboration with Biosphere Reserve, yes, definitely you are eligible. What would be needed is to have a letter of support from the authorities or the managing organization of this Biosphere Reserve, or any document actually providing evidence of this existing collaboration. If you have a memorandum of understanding, a contract, a partnership, whatever. But since you have already this collaboration, yes, it's great. It's a real asset.
Thank you. And the last question we'll take for this session, as a private service provider, there are quite a few issues that need to be addressed within protected areas, especially assessments of the status post a devastating hurricane, for example, Hurricane Maria in 2017. Do we need a formal arrangement with the custodians of these protected areas in the case of the Forestry Division before applying for the assessment grant?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, definitely you need to inform actually the forest division that you would like actually to apply and why you would like to apply and what type of assessment. Because as I indicate in addressing the former question, a letter of support is needed since you are not in charge of this area. And then in terms of formal arrangement, not necessary, but if you have already an existing collaboration, I guess you have already something, a mandate, a letter, an MOU, as I said, a contract, whatever. But already having this letter of support will clarify actually the fact that you are already connected, already in touch, and you have actually, I would say, the green light for doing so from the authority. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Anna, I will give you the last question. Can we hire a staff member to assist with the process if that cost is more than 5%, or would it have to be a contractor?
The budget is structured in the way that it is geared towards the subcontracted assessment, not the assessments which is provided by the staff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we want to move on to the second section of this call, which is to give you an idea of some of the tools that are available for participating in this grant call. So I am going to invite my colleague Jose Curo to share his screen and give you an overview of the Protected Areas Management Effectiveness Framework, some of the tools associated with that, and also the green list. So over to you, Jose.
Good morning and good evening for those in other parts of the world. Thank you for to all of those interested in this call for grants in a topic that is very much close to my heart, as those who know me can understand. It's important to clarify some of the meanings and options that could be presented in the call. And that's what I intend to do in the next minutes. First, the official definition of a protected area is a clearly defined geographical space, recognized, dedicated, and managed through legal or other effective means to achieve the long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem services and cultural values. This was coined in, well, revised first and then completed by IUCN in 2008. If an area that is contributing to conservation but does not meet this definition is not a protected area, but we are considering it now as a conserved area, which also accounts for conservation of biodiversity and ecosystem services, both valid mechanisms. And protected and conserved areas have pressures and threats that they have to face on a daily basis, and also management deficiencies that cripple or limit the successful results, conservation results that we are seeking. International agreements signed by most countries in the world have established targets to be reached at the global level. And two of the aspects that are of particular interest is that we want effectively managed protected areas and protected area systems, and also areas that are managed equitably with good governance. This has been an agreement worldwide, and we are now doing our best effort to implement them and make that a reality. And what is management effectiveness? In case you have never heard of this, the assessment of how well a protected area is being managed, primarily the extent to which it is protecting values and achieving goals and objectives. This is included in the WCPA IUCN guidelines for protected area management effectiveness that was published in 2006. Is the second edition of the guidelines. And you can find more details there. A little bit of history. The whole concept of management effectiveness evolved through World Park Congresses organized by IUCNs since 1983. In the 90s, some independent assessment systems were developed in some parts of the world. And as of 1996, WCPA in IUCN created a working group that became a task force in 1998 and made a big effort to complete the first edition of the guidelines for management effectiveness in 2000 and the second edition in 2006. The guidelines are available online freely for download. And they established the terminology that we use in management effectiveness, also provides a structure and evaluation criteria for tools to be used in management effectiveness, and provides detailed advice on carrying out assessments and using the results. Also present there's case studies in how to conduct the assessment from different parts of the world. In management effectiveness, functions or the tools that are based on the framework, which is what we expect all the tools to be, with this management cycle that represents a process that takes into account 6 components: context, planning, inputs, process, outputs, and outcomes. In the sense that we need to know with the context, where are we now in the protected area? What's happening in the protected area? Why is this area important? What are its values and what are the threats acting upon those values? In planning, we need to know where do we want to be as protected area and how will we get there? In the inputs, what are we going to need to get there? The process, how are we going to do it? What are the processes, the instructions, the guidelines to complete the management? What concrete outputs are we going to generate? Products and services that are going to be produced. And finally, the outcomes. What did we achieve? What are the successful conservation results that we are generating with the conservation action we're implementing in the protected areas? And this is an ongoing process that ideally will evolve over time with better, strong, and more robust results. And also provides us with an incentive to not only complete the assessments as an end on itself, but instead as a way to generate continued improvement in the management with the results. And we have periodic assessments that will give us results and will tell us what of the conservation action we're implementing is providing results and which are not. And so we can conduct adaptive management in our protected areas in a way to be more responsible and more efficient in the investment of resources that seem to be limited everywhere. And we came here to talk about tools, right? I cannot talk about all of them because right now I think the counting goes up to 70 different tools, some of them with some common ancestor in the history of protected areas and management effectiveness protected areas, because now it's, I think, 24 years or 23 years since we started doing management effectiveness. And throughout that time, 70 tools have been developed so far that we know. So in general, what we say is that the tools have to be useful and relevant to improve protected area management. That's the bottom line, and that's what we're looking for. We want tools that are logical and systematic. We also want tools that are based on good indicators, holistic, balanced, useful. We want the tool to be accurate, to measure what we want to measure precisely. Also practical to implement. Unless a few exceptions, you maybe do not want a tool that is too complicated or that will require significant investment of resources and time. I know some cases where that has been used, but they're not very common. Also, they have to be part of an effective management cycle, meaning that it has to be based on the framework that I just mentioned before. Also cooperative, participatory, with good communication, teamwork, relation of protected area managers and staff with stakeholders, neighbors, local governments, and so on. And also focused on positive and timely communication and application of results, as I explained before. This is an overview. I do not expect you to read that, but just an overview of tools that we know in different parts of the world. And this has been exceeded already. There are many more now that are not in this image. So that you have an idea of how different tools have been applied in different parts of the world. And one of these days I will have to draw an image of the ancestry of some of these tools to some of the common ancestors developed in the beginning of the history of management effectiveness. So there is a big toolbox with different tools, and here applies the expression in English, horses for courses. And these tools were developed and adapted and changed to meet a need in certain protected areas in certain parts of the world. So the idea is that they are not prescriptive, but they invite the sites to do some thinking, analysis, and probably adaptation. Many of these tools are available online. Many are in English. Some of them are in different languages. And it's also important to take into consideration. And the tools in general, I have tried to organize them in a way that they provide some guidance, sort of a decision tree when you want to pick tools, as I saw some of the questions earlier that you had, and some of the basic analysis that have been developed, the tools, RAPAM, MET, the previous version of MET or the original MET, the Tiger Reserves Assessment Reports, for instance, intermediate analysis like the WWF, the Farias tool developed for Brazil, the ProArca CAPAS that we developed in Central America, or the IAMAPs developed for Colombia that they rigorously apply, or in-depth analysis, enhancing heritage, IMET, and how is your marine protected area doing, developed by NOAA. This is just a way to organize them. I'm sure that there may be many other systems to categorize the tools. And obviously these are not all the tools. Enhancing heritage is what I call the Mercedes-Benz of tools in management effectiveness, what's developed for World Heritage sites, and which are the most important protected areas in the world. And it's very comprehensive. We make sure that we developed it taking into account the 6 components of the framework. And it's a very good in-depth analysis of the management, a very good way to document management of a site. It was developed for World Heritage Sites, but it can be used by any protected area that is up to the challenge. But I want to get more into MET, since it is very popular in the Caribbean, and we have been supporting through BIOPAMA implementation in some of the countries in the Caribbean. And there is experience in the region on using MET. It was originally developed in 2002 to track World Bank WWF Alliance for Forest Conservation and Sustainable Use Effective Management Target, and was based around the WCPA IUCN framework. It was required in every GEF project involving protected areas. They had to use, every country that had any project from GEF related to protected areas had to use the regional MET as a way to report progress of the investment of the project in protected areas. After that, there have been 3 versions published by WWF and World Bank in 2002, in 2005, the MET2, the MET3 in 2007, 2016, published a handbook on using the MET, and now we have the MET4 that was released or is being released this year, 2020. It has become the most used tool in the world. Record says that it's been applied in 2,500 protected areas in at least 127 countries. And that's because it's been translated into multiple languages. Because of this requirement of the GEF, it was translated into other languages besides English. The fact that it's required by the GEF and World Bank, and also adapted as the main protected area management effectiveness tool by protected area agencies, Namibia, Indonesia, and somewhat Central Africa, and also is being adapted for the Ramsar Convention sites. So it's very popular, it's very well known, and the use and access to the tool has been facilitated by the GEF and the World Bank. In the Caribbean, it has been used, as I said. We have records of assessments conducted with BIOPAMA in St. Lucia, in Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and probably I'm leaving at least one more out. But we have been using it, and mostly focusing on the MET4 version of the tool. And it has proven to be very friendly and applicable to the context of the Caribbean. And the original of the MET3 was still from the original a Word document that could be used, and so people could choose to use some parts of the MET or not, or complete some parts of the assessment, and others were left blank. However, because of this intensive application and extensive application of the tool, issues from management that were emerging from the assessment, and also expertise in technology, in computers, and development of apps and so on, over time, taken us to a new version of the MET4 that is better structured and easier to use, or more direct to use. And now the presentation is in a in an Excel format that was originally developed for the KfW, the German state-owned development bank, for assessment of the projects. And the Excel functionality means automatic presentation of results. It generates results as you're filling out the form in Excel. A big difference here is it's not like the Word document that you fill the parts that you wanted only. In this Excel version, you need to fill out everything in order to be able to move across spreadsheets. So if you don't complete one spreadsheet, you cannot move on to the next. So that is important because the MET needs a complete assessment in order to generate solid results at the end. It has a greater emphasis on outcomes, this MET 4. That's why it has additional worksheets that allow for more detailed assessment on community relations, planning, condition of values, natural and cultural, key species and habitats, and also threats like invasive alien species that was asked before. It has a spreadsheet that deals with threats and where you can expand on how those threats are assessed. The questions were reordered from the MET 3 to the MET 4 to allow to a more logical flow. The compliance with the 6 components of the framework were also reviewed. It was also reviewed. And now each of the questions is associated to each of the components of the management effectiveness framework. It has questions, new questions on up-to-date management issues like climate change, staff security, and connectivity. There are important topics to address. And it has also, I didn't put that down, but it has the option that when one question does not apply, you can tick a box and then the question will not apply to that assessment. Obviously, you have to say why in narrative. So it has additional spreadsheets for the protected area attributes. So originally, in the beginning, you provide information on the background information on the site and the assessment, who's doing it, dates, and so on. Also, identification of main site values and objectives, very important. Why is this place important? Where are the objectives? Then the threat assessment, as I mentioned before. It has a structure of multiple choice questions. So it's pretty straightforward. Still, you have to type in some text. I'm sorry, can get away without that. And also a detailed outcomes assessment of values, species, and habitat. Very important to complete those spreadsheets. So here are the 38 questions. No, you don't have to read them. I just want to impress you with the number of questions. And as you can see, they have sort of a highlighted format, so you can click in each one and go to the assessment of that question. And you can go back to the questionnaire, so to speak, where you can go to other questions. And I will reiterate that it's important that you complete the assessment of the 38 questions in order to have results like this that are summarized, presented graphically, and sort of a dashboard where you can have your results. Other tools have similar dashboards like the IMET and so on. But this is very, very well done, and it summarizes your results, and you can put this straight in our reports. And this you can use for proposals, you can use for social networks. If you want to communicate what's the status of your management, or you can share with your board or your stakeholders and so on. It's very useful information, and it reflects the seriousness that you use to complete your assessment. Obviously, I'm talking about the assessment, but the best way that you can use the MET4 and any other management effectiveness tool is if you do repeat assessments on periods of time that have been agreed upon and with participation of stakeholders and other groups of interest. it will provide you with the best results. Additionally, you have to fill in, as you respond to each question, which actions are you going to implement to improve your ranking that you get in each question. And these actions are organized by question, and at the end of the Excel, you will have almost automatically an action plan of the things you have to implement following the assessment in order to get a better result. And I'll make a halt here. I think Carol mentioned this in the beginning. We are not doing these assessments for assessments themselves. We are doing this because we want to improve the management of the sites. And here is where you see actions that specifically tell you how to invest your resources, how to better use your resources, your staff, your equipment, in actions that will provide you with results. It's not more work. This is the work. It's not new work. This is the work we should be doing. And the help that the tool provides is the structure, the organization, how to be systematic from now on your management, and how to be able to report to anybody in hierarchy, civil society, donors, whoever, or what you're doing and how you're doing, which is very important. The MET, well, it has been very popular, like I said before, worldwide. 65% of countries, not bad. It has helped identify management processes critical to success. The use continues increasing in the adaptation as well. San Lucia adapted the MET4 to create their own national tool recently, and they did a very good job. They mixed MET4 with enhancing your heritage. That was very interesting. It was with the support of BIOPAMA, and my dear colleague Justin has been taking lead on that adaptation, which is, I think, a good contribution. We hope that there will be more MET4 implementation and testing, and see how it yields in the Caribbean. So it's, if you want to look at it and test it, well, you can get it through us, Hyacinth, Justin, myself. They say it's available on that link, but I went to the link earlier before this seminar, and I couldn't find it. So better ask us for the tool if you want to use it, if you want to look at it. We'll be happy to share it without a problem. All this information on management effectiveness is being put together by the World Conservation Monitoring Center in Cambridge, and through the World Database on Protected Areas, or as we know it now, Protected Planet. It's online. All your protected areas should be there. All the information of your protected areas should be there. And they have a section on management effectiveness too. And there you can find more information about what has happened in the world, methodologies about the MET, some of the manuals, and some of the geographic coverage that management effectiveness has had over time. It's a good place to go. You just type Protected Planet in your search engine, and you will see it. Now the green list. I have to talk to you about the green list.
Jose,
yes.
Before you move ahead, could you go back to the slide before?
Yes.
Right, so this, I'm gonna type the link to the Protected Planet PAMI page, which will bring you to this visual that Jose has here. And as you can see, he has results, about, and manuals, methodologies, and MET. MET is where you will find the MET 4 tool. So you need to select that section to be able to get the MET 4 tool. It doesn't have a direct link. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hyacinth. Now, the green list. The green list of protected and conserved areas is one of the most recent knowledge products developed by IUCN. And I always relate it with this. If you have heard me talking about the green list, you know what I mean. We use a ruler in almost on a daily basis or frequently, depending on what kind of work you do. But we never question or wonder how it was developed. I'm not going to tell you that story. It's very boring, I think. But what I want to refer to here is that the green list, the standard of the green list, as we are implementing it now, is the ruler that we are building to measure management effectiveness, to measure quality of management. We never wonder how was the rule developing, how it became a pan-cultural tool, so that when everybody says, oh, this thing measures 10 centimeters, we have some sort of understanding of what that means. However, after thousands of years, we still have two conventions. If you see, we still have the English system and the metric system together, and they coexist, although metric system is used, I think, 98% of the countries in the world. But the idea with the green list is that is the reference worldwide on how a protected area could be called as well managed. And the green list has become, I say, the flavor of the month, but it's more than the month, because it started implementation in 2014 with the pilot implementation. And now 6 years later, we have many countries standing in line to get their protected areas recognized in this international program that celebrates good management. The overall objective of the green list is to increase the number of protected and conserved areas that are effectively and equitably managed and deliver conservation outcomes. If you remember the international target that I mentioned earlier in my presentation was seeking to reach this. Well, now with the green list, we're moving forward to be able to make it happen and to be able to account for it and demonstrate it. The green list is a way to celebrate protected areas that make an effort for good management. Protected area staff are rarely recognized in our countries, even though many times they have to deal with issues that exceed their capacity and challenges and threats that are really overwhelming in many respects. So the idea with the green list is to make an effort to document and demonstrate through management effectiveness and other processes and methods to be able to demonstrate that the protected area is being well managed. And there's an international recognition, and there are opportunities for that international recognition of doing good management in your protected area. The green list has 4 components that organize the criteria and indicators that describe good management. And the 4 components are good governance, effective management, sound design and planning, and successful conservation outcomes. Each of those components have criteria each of those criteria have indicators. I think it adds up to 54 indicators, if I'm not mistaken. And I want to call your attention to the aspect of successful conservation outcomes, because that's where we answer if the areas are delivering and if they are protecting what they're supposed to protect, and if they are delivering the results that they are expected to deliver. The use of the engagement in the green list involves voluntarily protected areas, sending an expression of interest to IUCN through an online link, stating that they want to commit to become a green list area. Once that happens, it triggers a process of implementation of the green listing country that involves the creation of an eagle, as you see there on the screen. It's an expert assessment group of the green list. It's a group of experts that voluntarily offer their time to lead the implementation of the green list in their countries. And usually it's a group of 8 to 12 people that had to follow an approval process based on the information they submit in the application to become an Eagle member, and that provide a very important guidance and supervision of the implementation of the green list until the area could be recognized as well managed and meeting the standard of the green list, which automatically means to become part of the green list family. It has three stages, the green list. One is the application phase. It's the first step, as I said, a voluntary commitment to the green list that is completely registered online. Also a candidate phase for those sites that apply. It's the second phase of the assessment in where the sites have to meet 5 indicators of the standard. Demonstrate with the approval of the Eagle of the external revisor. We have an external institution overseeing the implementation of the green list. They also have to review that. And if they approve, and the international hierarchy of the green list also approve the result of those 5 indicators, the sites move on to a green list phase, which is the last phase. And that's the nomination phase, where the area has to meet the rest of the indicators with enough means of verification, with the approval of the Eagle, the approval of the external revisor, and the approval of the green list committee. And then that site, if it goes through those approval processes, becomes a green list site and is incorporated in the protectedplanet.net as a green list site. You receive a 5-year certificate that hopefully will be used to the purpose that moved the site to apply in the first place. After the 5 years, a renewal process is required for continuation if the area so desires. And also during the 5 years, there's a midterm rapid review of performance to check the pulse of the site, see if they're still meeting the standard and the indicators. And there might be challenges or grievances that some people want to file for sites that are already in the green list and probably may or may not be violating any of the components or indicators of the standard. So there's a system to submit grievances and that will require a response from the Eagle, depending on the site and the country that is involved. And then the Eagles provide enough feedback to the sites during the process of the green list that will lead to improvement in management. So action plans that will tell the site how to improve their management to be able to meet the indicator that they are still lacking on reaching the standard of the green list. Right now, the green list has 46 areas listed in 14 countries and in different parts of the world. The closest ones we have for the Caribbean are Mexico with 2, Colombia with 3, Peru with 2, and the Costa Rica is in process, Honduras is in process, as is Brazil and Ecuador. And there might be others, but those are the ones I remember at the moment. We still don't have submissions from the Caribbean, although I think Belize soon will be also applying. And that's it for me. Thank you, and I will welcome any questions you may have.
If you have any questions on what has been presented so far, please type them in the chat. Sorry, not in the chat, in the Q&A section, and Jose can actually start to answer them there. At this point, however, I would like to invite Phil Franks to share his screen and give us an overview of available governance assessment tools. So Phil, over to you.
Yeah. My name is Phil Franks. I work with the International Institute for Environment and Development, based in the UK, in our Conservation, Communities and Equity programme. And I lead that programme. And one of the main areas of work we have, since I joined the programme 7 years ago, is these assessment tools for protected areas. And I'm going to talk about mainly 2, and I'll touch on another one, which is perhaps less applicable for this call. So it's very good to have this presentation immediately following Jose's, because a lot of what I'm going to say links very neatly with many of the things he says. So we've heard all about the Protected Area Management Assessment Framework and tools. And those of you who have followed some of the discussion on management and governance will know that the distinction is made between them like this. While management is more about the activities that are being carried out and planning for those activities, governance concerns the decisions about what activities are going to be implemented and how the responsible actors can be held accountable for doing what they're supposed to do. So that's on the right-hand side. Now, this notion of equity has become increasingly discussed and evident in conservation policy in recent years, including in the IHE Target 11, which Jose showed us, which includes the concept of equitable management. And over the last 5 years, I've been involved working with quite a large group of organizations to sort of unpack what equity means in the context of conservation. And it's quite clear that it's largely about issues of governance. And so you can see equity as having 3 dimensions. One is about the recognition of actors or stakeholders and rights holders and their rights. And the second one is procedure, which is all the issues around participation, transparency, accountability, dispute resolution. And then the third is distribution, which has been in focus in the early years of equity discussions around benefits and costs. So on the cost side, we have the mitigation of negative impacts, and on the benefit side, we have equitable sharing of whatever benefits may be available. So we have this framework, which you can see on the right of this slide, which is based on the IUCN framework of principles for good protected area governance. And that we've also shown in this framework how these principles, essentially this is boiling it down or distilling the big framework of IUCN down to 10 principles. And this shows how they align with the different dimensions of equity. So this framework, just like the one on the left for management effectiveness, this is, if you like, the analytical framework for governance assessment. And what you're doing is assessing governance with respect to these 10 principles, the quality of governance. So the first tool I'm going to talk about is social assessment. That is assessing how protected areas affect the well-being of the people living in and around them. Protected and conserved areas, PCAs, as we call them now. And this social assessment, and just like Jose gave a bit of history of management effectiveness, there is, when we started this work, we did an inventory of the methods that have been developed for social assessment and used in the context of protected areas. And there are mainly two. One is the Solomon methodology, which some of you may be familiar with in the marine context, and the other is something called Basic Necessities Survey, which is used mainly in forests. It was developed by WCS. And both of them are pretty broad-based, and Solomon in particular covers a whole range of issues, not just social impacts. So we were trying to develop something when we started looking at this that would be more focused. And this social assessment, it very much takes the approach of environmental impact assessment. In other words, and you'll see this arrow here shows the process. It's a stakeholder-led assessment. The stakeholders and rights holders do the assessment with the help of facilitators. So obviously they start with some preparation and reviewing existing information and a stakeholder analysis to see who should be involved. And then you have this stage of scoping, which is the key stage in environmental impact assessment of discussions with communities. What really are the key issues that concern them relating to the impact of protected area on their well-being, positive and negative. That enables you to identify a list of up to 10 priorities, positive and negative. And then you go into a household survey, a fairly small survey, focused on those issues. That takes about 45 minutes per household. Then you analyze the information, and you go back to the communities with that information to check it and explore further some issues. For assessment, and there's a stakeholder workshop where the results are presented and discussed. And last and not least, is a very important step called taking action. And just as Jose said, this tool is primarily for the stakeholders and rights holders to guide them on actions that they could take to improve the situation. That was what it was designed to do. And that's why we have that last phase. And we're trying to put more and more emphasis on that, because it's relatively, people get through the assessment and there's always the risk that the report just then sits on a shelf somewhere. So that is a really important part. Now, this SAPA assessment has been used mainly in a terrestrial context and entirely to date in Africa, in these different countries. And just to give you an example of the kind of results, the kind of way the results are presented, you have, like I said, here we have a park in Uganda, in East Africa. Social impacts, there are 8 that were identified as above a certain threshold of significance. And then from the survey, the relative contribution, actually this is the percentage of respondents who said these were important impacts for their well-being. These are the positives. And the interesting thing is, you see the number 1 at the top is actually an ecosystem service benefit to do with controlling runoff from the mountain that causes landslides and destroys people's houses and sometimes people. And then further down the list, you get things you might expect to find around projects, development projects funded by tourism revenue, access to resources and things. But quite often we find interesting things that you might not immediately think of, that actually are really important to community members. And quite often we find a difference between men and women in their perspective, younger and older people, and richer and poorer. So that's on the social impact side. Now, although SAPA is called social impact assessment, it has a governance element. which is focused around 5 governance principles that I showed you earlier. And in the SAPA form, there is a kind of this Likert scale approach where people are asked whether they agree or disagree or basically have no view either way on a certain issue. So the principles here are recognition and respect for the rights of relevant actors. The second is participation. The third is transparency. The fourth is mitigation of negative impacts. And the fifth is benefit sharing. And the big differences between agree and disagree are on transparency and mitigation measures. So that's the kind of, and then of course, it's not shown here, but you'll have differences between men and women and younger and older people. So moving on from this social assessment, but with the governance element, and this is kind of in the sequence in which we develop them, there is a methodology called governance assessment for protected areas. When we started this, like with the social assessment, we did an inventory of the existing methods that had been used with protected areas that we could find from the sort of published and the sort of grey literature. There were about 27, to be precise, of which 12 had actually been used with protected areas, and the others had been used in things like community forestry or fisheries that were not particularly, or that were not designated protected areas, but seemed to be relevant. But again, the level of usage of these was quite small, and at most 20 sites with 1 or 2 of the methodologies. And with one exception, that is a community-based tool, which is used in forestry a lot in Nepal and in Tanzania. By and large, very little has been done on governance assessment compared with management effectiveness, even though they were both kind of born at the same time in the World Parks Congress of 2003. And they were very strong, and in the following protected areas program of work, strong emphasis on both, but the governance assessment never took off in the way that management effectiveness did. And although there are some very good materials, particularly ones produced by IUCN and its commissions, there isn't much uptake in the way of tools. So this was the challenge, to try and develop a simple tool. Now this was the first tool that we developed, the governance assessment for protected areas. And I won't say much more about it, other than it uses the same process of preparation, scoping, information gathering, assessment, and taking action. It's very much qualitative, and essentially it all revolves around discussing with different groups of stakeholders what is working well in governance and what is not working so well, and why. And the why question takes you into underlying causes, and sometimes goes pretty deep and into sensitive issues. So we found that it works well with a well-established governance setup, but not something you would use where there isn't much, let's say, a good relationship between stakeholders. There isn't much in the way of established governance arrangements. They may not be ready for that kind of exploration of these sensitive issues. So with that in mind, and this we did develop this with GIZ and worked with them in a number of places with this. With that in mind, we thought we needed to develop something that was a little lighter and thinking about what the successes of management effectiveness, and that we talking to some of the people involved in management effectiveness and the development of the whole concept and tool. It seemed like if we could model it on management effectiveness, that would be a good way to do it. And that's what we've done with the third tool, which I'll talk about, which is called Site Level Assessment for Governance and Equity, or SAGE. And basically it is a stakeholder-led process. It is less than the previous one, and it covers a broader range of issues. It can be used with any type of protected or conserved area. And also, as I'll mention later, it covers the governance component of the green list. But the key thing, when I say it's similar to management effectiveness assessment, the key thing is that the tool is a questionnaire, just like management effectiveness, with 32 questions at the moment. Each multiple choice has 4 answers, alternative responses. When you decide what you're going to respond, you need to provide some evidence to justify that. And if you can think of any actions to improve the situation, then you also know it goes down. And in fact, the template we've been using to date is the Advanced MET template. We just switched the questions from the management questions to the governance and equity questions. And this is at an earlier stage of development. The next slide will show you where it's been used. And this includes Southeast Asia, Latin America, and also Europe, UK and Greece. And it's been used in marine areas, a few, though not many. It's about to be used in the Western Indian Ocean with LMMAs and MPAs in Kenya, Mozambique, and the Seychelles. So this is modeled on MAT. I would say the main difference is in the process. This stakeholder-led assessment, they basically start off with the communities and other, let's say the community members, men and women separately, local government officials, the managers, and maybe a private sector group. And they do this assessment separately initially, and then they come together to present to each other and discuss the similarities and differences in perspectives. And because so many of the governance issues are not so much fact-based, they're more, a lot of it is about the perception. So for example, let me say this, so this a result, a typical way of presenting the results. This is generated by the template, just like as with the latest version of MAT. Here you have 4 different stakeholder groups this is actually a part protected area in Zambia in Southern Africa. These are the 8 principles which they used in the assessment of respect for rights, respect for actors, participation, transparency, and so on. And the 4 bars represent the 4 different groups and the score that they gave out of a total of 3. The same as management effectiveness. You can have 4 responses which essentially represent a score of 0, 1, 2, and 3. So if you look at the overall pattern, you can see that the overall scores are fairly high on benefit sharing and achieving objectives, and relatively low on participation. You can also see some significant differences particularly between men and women in the community on the respect for rights, on participation, and on benefit sharing. So that's the kind of picture that you get from this assessment. Now, these are governance principles, but they're all of these except achieving objectives is also an equity principle. And so you can, and I don't think I've got it here, but you can essentially, you average the scores across the first 2, which is recognition, and then you average across the next 4, which is procedure, and you average across, and then you take benefit sharing, and you can plot it in a radar kind of diagram, similar to management effectiveness, and look at how the differences in 3 dimensions of equity, just like you can plot the differences across the 6 aspects of management effectiveness. So the question, I suppose, is the question as far as this call is concerned is, well, if I was interested in using one of these tools, which one would I use? And this is a little decision tree which we developed, which is trying to assist in answering that question. But before you get to which one would I use, there's a sort of fundamental question. Is there a willingness of key actors to engage with the assessment? All key actors, that means. because being stakeholder led, it can't be done by just a subset of the actors. You have to have the main groups represented in the process. But assuming the answer is yes, in many, if not most cases, it has been in our experience, then the next question is, what are you most interested in assessing? Is it the social impact, with governance being a sort of secondary issue, or is it governance and equity being the primary issue? And so the former, the social impact, would be the SAPA tool with, as I said, some governance, but not a strong emphasis on governance. The other two tools are focused on governance and equity. And then the question is, would you prefer to cover more issues with less depth or fewer issues with more depth? So if you're going for the broader approach, then the SAGE tool is the one that you would use, which is the one like management effectiveness, where you have this framework of, you have all these questions of 32 questions, and it's covering a wide range of issues. Or the deeper one, that's the GAPA, where you go into more depth. The issue there being, could the probing of sensitive issues create or exacerbate conflict? If that is a risk, then you better stick with SAGE. If not, then, and particularly if there are quite well developed governance arrangements and quite a lot of trust, you could get a lot out of using the GAPA tool. I suspect that in most cases, the people listening to this will be probably thinking more about the less in-depth tools, and also they are easier to facilitate. Whereas GAPA is qualitative. You've got to have facilitators who really can facilitate sometimes quite tricky discussions, and where they need a fairly in-depth knowledge of governance. Whereas with the other two, you have a framework of questions, so you don't need to understand governance that well to still be able to use the tool. Lastly, and this, I'm not going to go through this table, but it's you'll find if you look at the IIED website and you look for either of these tools, the SAPA, SAGE or GAPA, you'll find this, and it's trying to summarize the sort of strengths and I'm going to say weaknesses, but gaps, if you like, of these tools, and also how many facilitators you need, what's the typical cost, how long it takes, and so forth. So I would suggest, if you're interested, look up that, and if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you, Phil and Jose, for the overview of protected areas management effectiveness and governance. So while Phil was presenting, we had some questions on management effectiveness, which Jose answered in the Q&A section. And if you have any questions for Phil, I invite you to type them in the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand and we can invite you to present your question. So in terms of the management effectiveness question, so there was one from Aidan Farrell that asked, for a typical PA with no previous diagnosis tool, which tool should I use, the MET4 or IMET? And Jose believes you should have a look at both tools, consider the demands of time and content of each, and this will help you decide. And I think this would apply to any tool that you think you may need to use. You need to look at what the requirements are for implementing it and what would be realistic for your area. In terms of the green list, there was a question from Stasha. For the green list, do these have to be entire protected areas or sections of? The green listing process is for an entire protected or conserved area. And we have from Davidson Lloyd, what would be the most appropriate tool for baseline assessment of watersheds specifically or as part of protected areas? And so Jose wants clarification on what exactly you wanted to assess. What do you want to assess in the watershed? If it is management effectiveness, you can use the MET, but framing the use of the tool for that specific part of the PA. However, bear in mind that there are aspects of context, design, planning, inputs that will require to look at the whole PA. So Davidson, I invite you clarify your question or indicate if that response. Go ahead, Davidson, if you're there.
Okay, yeah, I'm there. Good day to everyone. Yeah, the context is in terms of a baseline being done to guide restoration of a watershed. So we want to, basically assess what's there, what are should be the priorities, and so on. So I was just wondering whether one of some of the approaches that he mentioned might be more appropriate.
Okay, Jose, do you want to?
Yes, please. I think that you could borrow from, for instance, from the MET, you can borrow some of the spreadsheets on the assessment of values and threats, and use that as to document your baseline on the value of the watershed. Not necessarily the management. It doesn't seem to me that that's your interest at the moment. But there's another tool that is, it is related to management effectiveness. In fact, we used it for the framework. It's called the PCA, developed by the Nature Conservancy. It's Site Conservation Planning, SCP. Nowadays, it's called something different. I'm not current on terminology with the TNC tools, but the neat thing of the Site Conservation Planning tool is takes you in an in-depth look at the values, the threats, and assessing them in very good detail with input from experts and so on. And that could be a very robust baseline, I think, for what you want. I would recommend that, and they moved the site conservation planning into, grew up into a software that is called Miradi, M-I-R-A-D-I, that makes, it's a quicker form to do the assessment. All this, I'm not sure about the Miradi, but the site conservation planning you can get online. If you don't, drop us a line and we will see how we can help.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going back to a question we had closer to the beginning of the session that was made by Natram Ramnanan, asking what tool will be best suited to assess the impact of invasive and alien species on protected areas. Response from Jose, because this is not in the Q&A section, I will post it in the chat. I believe that either MET4 or IMET will do a good job of assessing the protected area threats, such as IAS. However, they have different levels of depths of overall implementation. So something to take into account. So I just want to reiterate some information for you. Thank you very much for your participation in the session and taking the time. So just wanted to share this page with you that has resources so you can access all the information regarding this current call for proposals at this link. So you'll be able to get the guidelines, you'll get the templates for completing the application and so on. So I invite you to please have a look, and all submissions will be made on the action portal. So when you go to this page, if you have not yet applied to any BIOPAMA grants, you will need to create an account. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner of this page, action.biopama.org. You can log in or create an account and then be able to submit your application via the online portal. Some additional resources, the Green List. You can get more information at iucngreenlist.org. Management effectiveness. The first link is to the framework that Jose would have presented, the publication, and the second link would take you to the Protected Planet site that has the different methodologies, some of the different methodologies available, as well as access to the Med4 TEM tool. And then with respect to governance, as Phil indicated, you can go to the iid.org website. I did a search and you can get some general information on the three tools that he presented. We don't have a history of assessing governance in the Caribbean, but the BIOPAMA program is interested in facilitating and supporting that process in the time that we have left on project implementation. So if this is of interest to you, we definitely invite you to take advantage of this call, but also we would be interested to know how we can also support this going forward. In terms of accessing the regional team, this is the email address that you can send all your queries to, and the regional team will respond as soon as possible. So please use this email address to send any queries or questions related to this call. And with respect to this webinar session, it has been recorded and will be available at this website by earliest, hopefully tomorrow, that we will be able to post the video. I see one question has come in. Oh, thank you. All right. So I want to say thank you very much to everyone for taking the time. I hope this session was useful for you. And I look forward to receiving your submissions. The funding is there to support us, so please let us take advantage of advancing as much as possible the work that needs to take place in our protected areas. So thank you very much, everyone. And I also take the opportunity on behalf of my colleagues in the BIOPAMA program to wish you all happy holidays. It has been quite an interesting year. It's not over, but please enjoy the rest of the time that we have in 2020, and we look forward to working with all of you in 2021. So thanks again and take care.